The galaxy was a vast, cold place. And in its darkest corners, humanity was nothing more than a whisper, a rumor, a story passed from one species to another, if they remembered at all. They said that once, humans had been the conquerors of 1,000 worlds. But now they were gone. Their empire had fallen, their cities crumbled, and their people wiped away by the very forces they had sought to control. Or so they thought. All that remained of humanity was a single woman, Lyra Solis, the last human. The war had been long over. The Zrill Empire, a vast, insectoid species that had once been humanity's greatest adversary, had seen to that. In their final assault, they had pushed Earth's colonies to the brink of annihilation. Lyra had seen it all. She had watched her people fall one by one, seen her comrades in arms die in terrible, soul-crushing ways. The survivors scattered across the stars, eventually disappearing into history. And then, for a time, there was silence. But silence, as Lyra knew, was dangerous. It allowed old enemies to plot and new ones to rise. The Zrill had won, but they were not satisfied. Power was never enough. The galaxy was their playground, and humanity's extinction had only been a milestone. They knew, deep down, that there was something else about Earth, something more. And it was this final lingering curiosity that had brought them back to the forgotten corner of the galaxy. Lyra stood alone on the bridge of the glimmering dawn, an aging ship that had once belonged to her father. Now it was her home, a relic. Her fingers hovered over the controls, but her mind was elsewhere. For all the years of silence, she had never forgotten the taste of war. It was ingrained in her blood, a reminder that peace was fragile and fleeting. It could be shattered at any moment, and in that moment, she would need to be ready. Suddenly, a beep from the console broke her reverie. A transmission. She sat up straight, her eyes narrowing. The message was from a known enemy. The Zorith Collective, a ruthless, militaristic species that had long seen humanity as a threat, even in their dwindling days. Their fleets had been on the move for months, and now they had come to the very region of space where Lyra had made her quiet exile. "They're close," she muttered to herself. Too close. The Zorith had no idea she was here, but that would soon change. Lyra had spent years building her strength in secret, learning the ways of their enemies, understanding their tactics, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their arrogance. The Zorith were dangerous, no question, but they were predictable. And now, with their fleets moving toward her, Lyra knew she had no choice but to act. She had wanted peace. She had hoped for a quiet life among the stars, away from the horrors of war. But the universe had never allowed her that luxury. And now, with the Zorith poised to strike, she would have to fight. But not in the way they expected. She would play their game, but on her terms. The ship's internal communication system crackled to life, and a familiar voice echoed in her ear. "Lyra, we've got trouble." It was Maya, her longtime ally, and the only other human left in the galaxy. Lyra's heart tightened at the thought of her, but she couldn't afford to be sentimental now. She needed Maya. "What's happening?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "We've got Zorith scouts just outside the system. They're scanning the area. They don't know we're here yet, but it's only a matter of time before they pick up our signal." Lyra's eyes scanned the starfield outside the glimmering dawn's viewports. The Zorith fleet was still several hours away, but their presence was already felt. Her pulse quickened. The time to act had arrived. "We need to be ready," Lyra said, her tone cold. "Prepare the ship. All systems online. I'll be on the command deck." She ended the transmission and turned to face the array of ancient warships in the hangar bay. Their sleek forms a stark contrast to the rusted metal of her own vessel. The weapons were old, but they still had teeth. The glimmering dawn might be outdated, but it was fast, and it was armed to the teeth. She had a plan, a single chance to outsmart the Zorith, and she couldn't afford to miss it. Lyra stepped toward the hangar doors, her mind calculating the coming battle. If everything went according to plan, she might just make out alive. But if she was wrong, well, there was no if when you were the last human alive. Either she won, or humanity died for good. and she would not let them win. To be continued. You said. Lyra stood at the helm of the glimmering dawn, her fingers lightly gripping the worn controls as her mind whirred with calculations. She had never liked being the strategist. During the war, she had preferred to be in the thick of the action, fighting alongside her comrades. But now, with only herself and Maya left, there was no room for mistakes. There could be no second chances. She looked out at the endless stretch of stars before her. Somewhere out there, the Zorith fleet was on the move, a force of untold power. They were closing in on her position. But the Zorith didn't know what they were walking into. They had never faced a human like Lyra Solis. Ready, Captain. Maya's voice came over the comms. We've completed the first stage of the plan. The decoy drones are set and the cloaking system is online. But we still need you to lead the charge when it's time. Lyra felt a knot in her stomach. Maya had been her partner through it all, loyal, clever, and unwavering. But even Maya couldn't fully understand the weight of what was about to happen. They were up against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. The odds were impossible. But if there was one thing humanity had always excelled at, it was turning the tide of a battle when the universe thought all hope was lost. We're not just going to fight them, Maya, Lyra said, her voice low. We're going to make them think they've already won. We're going to make them chase shadows until it's too late. A heavy silence followed. Lyra knew Maya was processing the plan, weighing the risks. But the truth was there was no other choice. This was a fight for survival, and it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about humanity's legacy, their survival in the minds of every species in the galaxy. The Zorith had thought they could erase humans from history, but Lyra wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. Suddenly, the ship jolted, a brief but violent shake that sent the crew reeling. The shields flickered, a warning light blaring across the console. Lyra's heart raced. What the hell was that? She asked, her gaze snapping to the readouts. Maya's voice came back, calm but tinged with concern. We've been detected. The Zorith scouts have us on their radar. Lyra cursed under her breath. The Zorith were faster than she had anticipated. She should have known they would send a probe ahead. The only reason they hadn't attacked immediately was because they hadn't realized what they were up against. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they lock onto us, Maya continued. What's the next move? Lyra's eyes flicked over the nearby tactical screen. A quick glance showed several red blips closing in. They were fast, but they didn't know the glimmering dawn's tricks. Lyra's heart slowed as she focused. Activate the drones, she said, the decision final. I'll draw their fire. Without hesitation, Maya engaged the drone fleet. The glimmering dawn's hangar doors hissed open, releasing a dozen sleek, silent ships into the void. They scattered, splitting into multiple formations, simulating a fleet of warships, all moving at various speeds. The Zorith, upon detecting them, began to shift their course, calculating their trajectory, determining the size of the threat. Lyra didn't wait to see if the plan was working. She slammed the throttle forward, sending the glimmering dawn into a sharp, almost reckless turn. The ship's inertial dampeners kicked in as she pressed every ounce of her will into the controls. She could hear the hum of the engines, the sharp screech of metal against space, as they accelerated toward the incoming Zorith fleet. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She had one chance to make this look convincing. The Zorith scouts opened fire, their plasma bolts splintering off the glimmering dawn's shields in a chaotic cascade. Lyra gritted her teeth, pulling the ship into a series of erratic maneuvers. She didn't need to destroy them. She just needed to make them think they were facing more than one ship. The drones would be the decoy. She would be the lure. Move us toward the asteroid field, Lyra ordered, her eyes darting over the readouts. She could feel the sweat forming on her brow, the tension building in every muscle. If she timed this wrong, they would all be dead. The glimmering dawn lurched into a sharp left, plunging toward the dense field of asteroids ahead. The Zorith would follow her, of course. They would chase the fleeing target, just as she'd hoped. The debris would slow them down, making it easier for the drones to slip away and distract them further. But it also meant the Zorith would lose their focus. The moment they underestimated her was the moment she would strike. Maya's voice came back, a note of urgency creeping into her tone. "They're locking weapons on us again, Lyra. They're not buying the trick for long." Lyra didn't flinch. She could feel the Zorith closing in, their powerful ships slowly catching up. But she didn't need them to think they were winning. She needed them to think they had already won. "Just a little longer," she whispered to herself, even as her fingers gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity. Then, without warning, she cut the engines. The glimmering dawn came to a sudden stop in the middle of the asteroid field. The Zorith ships, too focused on the chase, plowed into the field behind her, their sensors momentarily disoriented by the debris. Lyra's eyes widened. "Now, Maya. Now." The comms burst into action as Maya triggered the final stage of the plan. A wave of powerful electromagnetic pulses erupted from the drones, temporarily disabling the Zoritha's weapon systems. It was a gamble, one that would either give them a narrow window to escape or lead to their utter destruction. The ships around Lyra flickered as the Zorith struggled to regain control. The first shot was fired, but it wasn't from the Zorith. To be continued. The blast from the glimmering dawn's decoys reverberated through the surrounding asteroid field, sending shockwaves through the hull. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she watched the chaotic dance of Zorith ships struggling to regain their control, their weapon systems malfunctioning from the pulse. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything seemed to slow. The Zorith were blinded, their targeting systems flickering in and out as they tried to reorient themselves. But then, in the midst of the confusion, came the unmistakable sound of something else. A blast of pure energy. The glimmering dawn shuddered as something sliced through the dark silence. Another shot, this time from the far side of the asteroid field. It was so powerful that the shields flared in response, almost buckling under the pressure. "Lyra, we've got another ship incoming," Maya said, her voice tight with alarm. That blast didn't come from a Zorith. Lyra's eyes darted to the tactical readout, scanning for any sign of this new threat. Her heart skipped a beat as a new ship appeared on the sensors. It was massive, and it was moving fast, much faster than anything the Zorith had sent. Its design was sleek, almost elegant, with sharp angles and glowing blue accents. It was unmistakable. "A Virex ship," Lyra whispered, her pulse quickening. "How the hell did they find us?" The Virex were a shadowy race, mysterious, unpredictable, and elusive. They had never shown any interest in humanity before, at least not directly, but their technology was some of the most advanced in the galaxy. The Virex were known for their use of stealth infiltration and their absolute refusal to be bound by the laws of galactic politics. They had no allies, no stated agendas, just a cold, calculating presence that often appeared when least expected. The Zorith had their sights on them, but if the Virex were involved, well, things had just become far more complicated. "Should we engage?" Maya asked, her voice low but steady. Lyra shook her head. "Not yet. If we fight them now, we'll be caught between the Zorith and whatever the hell the Virex are planning. We need to keep our distance." But it was already too late. The Virex ship, with its eerie glow, moved into the midst of the asteroid field, cutting off any potential escape routes. Its weapons were powered up, and it was drawing a bead on the Zorith. The Zorith, momentarily distracted by the mysterious arrival, made the mistake of closing in on the Virex ship. They fired blasts of green plasma lighting up the dark field, but the Virex ship was too fast. It moved like a shadow, dodging and weaving with supernatural precision. The Virex retaliated with a single shot, and the Zorith ship closest to it exploded in a flash of violent light. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. "Shit," she muttered, gripping the controls hard. "They're engaging. The Zorith don't stand a chance against them." "They're not the only ones in trouble," Maya replied, the tension clear in her voice. "The Virex know we're here too. They're targeting us." Lyra cursed again. The Virex were notorious for hunting down anyone they considered an inconvenience, no questions asked. If they thought the glimmering dawn was a threat, there would be no hesitation in erasing them. "Any suggestions, Maya?" Lyra asked, a grim thought crossing her mind. We need to get out of here. Now. Maya's voice was urgent. If they want to fight, they'll get it, but we'll be caught in the crossfire. The Zorith aren't giving up. Lyra weighed her options. The asteroid field was dense, a labyrinth of rocks and debris that could serve as a shield, but also a trap. The Zorith would be too reckless, and the Virex would simply slip through it with ease. There was only one way to avoid the worst of it. Play dead. I've got an idea, Lyra said, her eyes narrowing as she studied the readouts. She engaged the cloaking system, and the glimmering dawn's signature faded into the background, slipping under the radar, just as the Virex ship began to fire once again at the Zorith. She could feel the tension in the air. The ship was ghostly silent as the cloak engaged, and even the stars outside the viewports seemed to dim. It's risky, Maya said after a pause. But if they don't know we're here, we might have a shot. We don't need a shot, Lyra said with a steel edge to her voice. We just need time. The glimmering dawn coasted in the silence of space, hidden within the cloud of debris and the chaos between the Zorith and the Virex. The moment felt surreal, Lyra, Maya, and their ship, just a tiny speck in the massive void. The two enormous fleets, Zorith and Virex, clashed in a cataclysmic dance of energy blasts and evasive maneuvers, a violent spectacle of war. But that wasn't Lyra's fight. Not yet. Lyra was focused on something else entirely, something she'd sensed earlier. The unknown, whoever or whatever was watching them. A faint blip on the far corner of the radar, something that didn't belong. A new player. And this player had not yet revealed itself. What's the reading on that unknown signal? Lyra asked, her eyes sharp. Maya's fingers flew across the console. It's faint, but it's there. Something with the same signature as the Virex, but different. It's like... Lyra didn't let her finish. She stood, her voice low and determined. I need to know who it is, Maya. Now. The moment the words left her mouth, the answer came in a flash. Another ship. Smaller than the Virex, its markings unfamiliar. But one thing was clear. It was not a Zorith ship. It wasn't even anything the Virex had designed. And it was moving toward them. Prepare for company, Lyra said, a chill running down her spine. To be continued. The unknown ship's approach was slow but deliberate, its sleek silhouette cutting through the asteroid field with quiet precision. Its form was almost ghostly, dark, and unmarked, a perfect contradiction to the chaos around it. The Virex and the Zorith were locked in their violent dance, but this new ship moved like it was untouched by either. Lyra's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at her to prepare for the worst. She'd been a soldier long enough to know that silence could be just as deadly as noise, and this ship's silence was deafening. The way it moved, calculating and precise, suggested it was no ally of the Zorith. And it certainly wasn't a friend to the Virex. Any idea what we're looking at? Lyra asked, her voice calm but tinged with tension. Maya was already studying the data on the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. I can't make sense of the readings. The ship's emitting some kind of dampening field, completely masking its signature. I can barely get a scan through it. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. Lyra clenched her fists. The unknown ship wasn't just using advanced technology. It was hiding its very presence in plain sight. That level of sophistication, that level of intent. The implications were chilling. Whoever they are, they're not here by accident, Lyra muttered. She shifted her gaze to the radar, watching as the ship grew ever closer. Every minute, every second felt like a countdown to something unpredictable. Maya glanced at her. What do we do? We're cloaked, but they're closing in on us fast. If they're hostile, Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. We have no choice but to find out. But we're not making the first move. She was no longer alone in the decision-making. Maya had already moved into action. A series of tactical options flashed across the console, and Lyra's sharp eyes caught the significance of each one. Maya had initiated a deep scan of the approaching ship, though the results were faint and fragmented. There, Maya said, pointing to a readout that finally made sense. They've activated some kind of passive comm link. It's faint, but it's there. They want to communicate. I think they're aware of us." Lyra paused. The unexpected development only added more layers of uncertainty. They want to communicate? That wasn't a Zorith move. And the Virex, they didn't communicate. They just killed. "Put it through," Lyra said, her voice tight. A moment later, the comm channel flickered, then stabilized. The voice that came through was calm, with a faint, almost mechanical quality. "This is the Elysium Protocol," the voice said, deep and resonant, sending a shiver down Lyra's spine. "To the last human, Lyra Solis, this message is for you." Lyra's eyes widened. How did they know her name? "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice rising despite herself. The voice on the other end paused, as if considering the question carefully. "We are not your enemy, Lyra Solis. At least, not yet. But your continued survival has become a matter of significant interest. We have been watching." The hair on the back of Lyra's neck stood up. Watching? How long had they been watching? How much did they know? "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are here to offer you an alternative," the voice replied. "An opportunity. You are alone, isolated, but your significance is greater than you know. The Zorith and the Virex, they are part of a larger design. You are more than a remnant of a dead species. You are a key." Lyra's mind raced. A key? To what? Her fingers hovered over the controls, ready to cut the comm channel if this turned into a trap. She had no time for games, not when her life and humanity's legacy was on the line. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested in being a part of it," Lyra said, her tone hard. "You've got two choices. Back off, or I make you regret this." The voice was silent for a long, tense moment. Then it spoke again, its tone unchanged, almost calm to the point of disarming. "The Zorith are a threat, yes. But they are but a cog in the machine. You have seen their destruction, Lyra Solis. The truth is much darker than you realize. The war, it was never just about the Zorith. Your species was targeted for a reason, but the war wasn't the end. It was a signal to us. Targeted? For a reason." Lyra felt her blood run cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" The voice continued as though Lyra hadn't spoken. "Humanity was not merely the victim of a war. You were selected. Your genetics, your potential, they are the linchpin in a galaxy-wide power shift. A shift that is already in motion, and one that you are now uniquely positioned to stop." Lyra's thoughts blurred. Genetics? Potential? Power shift? She had seen the end of humanity through the eyes of an eyewitness, standing on the front lines. The last surviving human. The story had always been that humanity had been wiped out, lost to the void. The galaxy nothing more than a graveyard of their once proud empire. But now, it seemed that the truth was far more convoluted. "You're telling me," Lyra said slowly, "that I'm supposed to stop something bigger than the Zorith?" There was a pause on the other end, and when the voice spoke again, it was almost pitying. "You are not the last human because you were forgotten, Lyra Solis. You are the last human because you are the only one left with the key to end the conflict. You and your bloodline." Lyra's eyes narrowed. Her bloodline? Her thoughts drifted back to her parents, her family. Gone, all of them. Wiped out by the Zorith. "Tell me what you mean," she demanded, almost frantic. The voice didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched on for a few more seconds before the final bombshell dropped, low and dangerous. "You are not the last human, Lyra. You are the first." To be continued. Lyra's world seemed to halt. The words hung in the air, reverberating in her mind with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are not the last human, Lyra. You are the first." The comms crackled in the eerie silence that followed, as if waiting for her to react. But Lyra's thoughts spun in 1,000 directions. She opened her mouth to speak, but found no words, just an overwhelming rush of confusion and disbelief. The voice on the other end was calm, almost soothing. "You were always meant to be more than a survivor, Lyra. You and your bloodline were preserved for a reason. The war against the Zorith, the fall of your empire. It was a calculated measure, not for extermination, but for evolution. The galaxy does not understand this yet, but you are the catalyst. Your survival, your uniqueness, is part of a far larger plan. Her mind screamed for answers, but she forced herself to focus. Survival, evolution plan? What the hell was going on? Her pulse quickened as she thought of everything she had been through. Losing Earth, watching her friends and allies fall, fighting in wars that had seemed senseless and endless. And now this. A voice from the unknown, telling her that the reason for all of it had never been what she thought. How do you know my bloodline? Lyra demanded, her voice raw with emotion. How do you know anything about me? The voice responded with an almost eerie calmness. We have been watching humanity for millennia, Lyra. From the shadows. You and your ancestors were never just another species in the galaxy. You were chosen even before your birth. Chosen for something far greater than the mere survival of your people. The weight of those words settled into Lyra's bones. Her ancestors had been chosen? She thought back to stories her father had told her as a child. Tales of ancient human expeditions, of spacefarers who had ventured to distant stars long before the wars began. She had thought they were just stories, myth, the last remnants of humanity's sense of grandeur. But now she was beginning to understand. And none of it made sense. I don't know who you are, Lyra said, her voice shaking with frustration. But I don't have time for games. If you think I'm just going to roll over and trust you, you're mistaken. I'm the last human, the last of my kind. You, whatever you are, can't change that. The voice softened, almost sympathetically. You are not the last human, Lyra. You are the first, because you are more than human. Your evolution is ahead of you, not behind you. The Zorith may have wiped out your people, but they didn't destroy you. They didn't destroy what matters. You are the key to the next phase. Your blood, your DNA, it carries the future. And it's time for you to take your place in it. Lyra's mind whirled as she processed the words. Evolution? My DNA? What are you talking about? She had always thought of herself as just another soldier, just another person fighting to stay alive in a galaxy that had long since abandoned the human race. She had never imagined that she could be anything more than that. But the voice continued, a thread of cold certainty running through its every word. You and your people have been dormant for too long. The universe is not what it seems. The Zorith, the Virex, even the Teldari, every species you've ever encountered. They are all pieces in a game far beyond their comprehension. A game that you are meant to win. You are the first, Lyra. And the galaxy will be remade by your hand. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. A game? To win? She could hear the distant sounds of battle still echoing between the Zorith and the Virex. The thought of power, of being in control of the fate of the galaxy, sent a shiver down her spine. But it also sparked a fire inside her. What if she could be more than just a survivor? What if humanity's extinction had been planned, but not for its end, but for its rebirth? What if she could turn the tide? What if humanity wasn't finished? How? Lyra asked, almost whispering. The word felt foreign in her mouth, a desperate plea for the truth. How do I stop this, whatever is? For the first time, the voice faltered, then answered with something more tangible, more real. You must come to us. We are waiting. There is a place in the galaxy, a system that exists outside of time. It is where humanity's evolution will unfold. It is where you will understand what you are meant to become. And you must go now, before the war spreads beyond your control. Lyra's mind raced. There was no way she could trust this voice. Everything about it screamed manipulation, deceit. But in her gut, something whispered that there was truth here, even if she didn't fully understand it. She had always known that there was more to humanity's downfall than the Zorith. The galaxy had been rearranged long before their first shot was fired. The only question now was whether she had the strength to accept her place in it. Where? She asked, her voice steady, the weight of decision settling over her. The voice gave a single set of coordinates, hidden deep in an uncharted part of the galaxy, far from the war-torn space where she had fought so long. The path ahead was unknown, the risks unimaginable. But one thing was certain. The game was not over. Not for humanity. And certainly not for her. We will be watching Lyra Solis. We will be waiting. The comm channel went dead, leaving nothing but static. Lyra stood in the silence, alone, her hands trembling. She glanced at the chaotic scene unfolding outside. The Zorith and the Virex were still locked in their brutal war. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel helpless. She didn't feel like just the last human. She felt like the first. And the first always had the power to reshape the future. To be continued.